You're listening to episode 35 of the Fed and Fearless podcast. On today's episode, Emily Field will share how flexible dieting and tracking macros can actually lead to more food freedom and more intuitive eating for your needs. So stay tuned. Hi, I'm Laura Schoenfeld. I'm a registered dietitian and coach trained in functional medicine with a passion for helping women just like you ditch perfectionism and use food, fitness, and self-care to fuel your bigger God-given purpose. I believe that it's possible to achieve your biggest life-changing goals without the frustration, obsession, or negative self-talk that so many women subject themselves to every day. All you need are the right tools, the right mindset, and the faith to turn your dreams into reality. I'm here to guide you along the way. The truth is that you are so much more than a body, and I'm on a mission to help you change the way you think and act at a core beliefs level so you can transform your physical, mental, and spiritual health from the inside out. Are you ready to become fed and fearless in your pursuit of a healthy, meaningful life? Welcome to the Fed and Fearless podcast. Hey everyone, welcome back to the Fed and Fearless podcast. I'm Laura Schoenfeld, your host as always, and we have a really awesome episode for you guys today, especially for any of you who have ever struggled with trying to decide if you wanted to do something a little bit more focused and effortful when it comes to your diet, or if you just want to totally throw any diet rules out the window and just eat whatever you want and do more of the intuitive eating approach. That tends to be the two options that are presented to us when it comes to the way that we eat. And my guest today is one of the big experts in the field that helps you combine both a more purposeful approach to eating as well as an ability to eat intuitively while also supporting your health. So at the end of the day, intuitive eating is really awesome. But if you don't understand your basic nutritional needs and you don't really know how to adjust things like macros or total calories to help you feel your best, then a lot of times intuitive eating can fall a little bit short when it comes to promoting optimal health. And that's why my guest today has created an online program and so many resources for showing you how to track macros and to understand macros in a way that's not disordered or obsessive about diet. So my guest today is Emily Field. Emily is a registered dietitian who teaches a mindful macros approach to help women ditch nonsense food rules and depriving diet behaviors for good. Her clients find it liberating to focus on how much they can do instead of how much they weigh when they fuel and support their body appropriately. And Emily's approach is something that I have definitely seen work very well for the clients that I've worked with. Just being able to understand macros and to take a very scientific approach mentally to understanding macros and calories and portion sizes and all of that, and really eliminating any of the stress or anxiety around tracking and understanding those things and using them as an effective tool to improve your health. And on the same side of the equation, Emily's great at helping you understand why certain food rules that are promoted as being healthy are actually completely useless and have nothing to do with how healthy you are and can be easily ditched so that way you can enjoy the food that you love. So all of that said, I'm super pumped to talk to Emily. She was one of my business coaching clients last year, and it was really just amazing to see the work that she's doing and to just get to follow her and see everything that she's accomplished in the last year in her business. So I'm pumped to have her with me today. And without further ado, here is Emily. All right, everybody. I am so excited to have with me on the podcast today, Emily Field, RD. Welcome to the show, Emily.
Thanks so much, Laura.
Emily is someone who I've been following for a while in the world of online virtual dietetics, and she's got an awesome platform, an awesome virtual business, which has just been really cool to see everything that she's been doing over the last few years. And I'm just pumped to have her on the show today to talk to you guys about a topic that I know is near and dear to her heart and something that, you know, I think there's so many questions about, so many myths and confusion, and there's lots of different opinions about it. So I think we'll have a really good conversation today about something that could be controversial, but I think doesn't have to be. So before we get started, I just want to give our audience a chance to get to know you better, Emily. So I would love to hear from you, your story, and just a little bit about the journey that brought you to where you are today as a dietitian who teaches macros.
Sure. So I always knew that I wanted to work in the area of like health prevention, or like not the prescribing aspect of health, but more the prevention aspect of health. And so I always thought that food and nutrition was really cool. The psychology around food was really interesting. And obviously that's very intricately related. I almost pursued a psychology major, but I decided not to, and kind of found myself in dietetics in college, and it was like a perfect match for me. And so I jumped through all the hoops. I got the degree and I got the credentials, and I got to my internship, which is after your college degree and you're studying to be a dietitian, kind of the last step there before you get your RD after your name. And I just felt like none of the rotations that I was in, none of the dietitians that I shadowed had the job that I wanted, and I was feeling really lost. So I worked for a few years. I did continue to get the credential, and I'm happy that I did. And I worked for a few years for WIC, Women, Infant, and Children. And then I found my way into a health coaching job, which is actually where everything blossomed. I finally had this marriage of like health behavior change and like psychology, and like I got to talk about food all the time with people. But I think the real kicker there was because I was working for a health coaching company, and they were driven by helping people see change in their health, and metrics became really, really important. Blood pressure, BMI, their insulin numbers, their glucose numbers coming down. I had to make change with people and leverage with them very quickly over the phone. So I had to we had to strip down to the bare bones of like what was standing in their way of making change in their nutrition. And so that was like a huge time for me in as far as growth as a practitioner. And eventually that found its way to me wanting to work for myself. And through my CrossFit gym was able to bridge that gap between working for someone else and working for myself.
Awesome. I actually did an undergrad in psychology, and my honors thesis was focused on health psychology and really behavior, and trying to think of the best way to describe it. It was looking at self-control and how mindfulness actually affected self-control strength, which if anybody has ever done psychology as a major, you might have learned about things like, the self-control research and everything like that. So it's funny that you almost did psychology, but then you went to the dietetics route. And for me, I did psychology and then realized that pursuing, I was looking at maybe doing a PhD or something. And then I'd always been interested in nutrition because I was an athlete and, learned a lot about it just from a performance perspective. And it just kind of made more sense to do more like an applied type of job as opposed to research. So that's cool that you have a similar background. So you were a health coach, and then you started working with clients privately through your CrossFit gym. And when did you go full time in your own business?
I guess there was a turning point there where it was like, I couldn't serve more people unless I had more time. So I had to cut back, essentially I had to make the leap across the chasm that seems so big when you're there, but then it's just like, I'm so happy that I did, quitting the full-time job and working 100% for myself. It is scary. And I think there might be a lot of practitioners that might be in the same spot, maybe thinking about doing that. And you just have to make the leap, and then you fill in the gap. Once you've made that leap, I physically could not have taken on another client or served another person without pulling my hair out and being so stressed out because I was working 40 hours a week and also trying to do this. So.
Wow. Yeah. I work with a lot of RDs and other healthcare providers as a business coach. And that's something that you obviously don't want to just dive straight into private practice if you're your sole income provider. But I think a lot of people get to that place where you got, where it's like, I am going to physically crumble if I try to do one more client with my private business. And it is scary to make that change if it's something that, a stable 40-hour week job, maybe you have benefits, that kind of thing. It can be a little scary, but I always, whenever I'm coaching people, I always help them think about opportunity cost, right? And I think that applies to any decision that you make, but just thinking about, what is it costing me to stay in this position that, I could be doing something different in my business or putting more energy into it. Or, like in your case, maybe you just really, really loved what you were doing with your own business and you were missing out on the opportunity to grow that. So I don't want to get too much into the business stuff because I'm like prone to talk about that. But and when was that? Was that in the last couple of years?
Man, that was 2017, early 2017, I went full-time for myself. So it's been 3 years now. And I will just piggyback on the last thing you said. It's like, I am the queen of efficiency. I found all the ways to cut corners on time and hiring help. And I think that was what made the transition easier for me than it is for other people, because they're still doing everything by themselves and they may not have the tools, virtual tools to make that transition easy. So I tried to do my best to serve as many clients as possible while doing my full-time job, because I had great access to tools and online virtual
resources
and stuff like that. But even then, there's a cap. There's a cap at how much you can handle. But yeah, that would be my advice, is to get all that stuff in place first. And I know you guide people really well in that, in order to make that transition pretty seamless.
Yeah. Well, and so what was it about macros because macros are such a funny thing, because it's something that from a physiological perspective is fairly simple, right? It's not like there's a ton of different macronutrients that you have to know. There's just 3 that we really need to be aware of. And when we're going through our education as RDs, it's, I know we had macronutrient biochemistry as a course, but it's just one class in however many classes we take as an RD. So it's one of these things where it's very simple and it's also very complicated for a lot of people. And so what was it about the concept of macros and macro tracking and even just macro awareness that kind of pulled you in that direction to focus on that in your business?
Well, like I said, I think, in the beginning, for me, it was really important to help people make change very quickly. So part of my philosophy and foundation as an early RD was always how can I help someone understand how their plate should be structured? Because we don't think in terms of the whole day. We don't think in terms of the whole week. We can really only think about what is on our plate right now. And I first started by teaching people a PFC method. So what foods have protein, what foods have fats, and what foods have carbs. But let's try to have all 3 in balance from real whole food at every single meal. And that one concept, that foundational concept, can get you pretty far, as you're probably aware, from a physiological standpoint, reduced cravings and feeling more energized and more satiated, that sort of thing gets people pretty far. But the next logical question in my clients' minds was, okay, well then how much protein, how much fat, and how much carb should I have? So once we've mastered the basics, it's a very easy transition to be okay, well then how much? And so that's when macronutrients comes in. It kind of helps us have some rails on how much food is appropriate for you, how much protein, how much fat, and how much carb is appropriate for you.
So I don't want to assume that everybody knows what we're talking about, even though I think macros are so ubiquitous these days that most people have at least heard of them. What are some of the basics of quote unquote macros that you think our listeners should understand while we're talking about them as a concept?
So macronutrients are the large nutrients that make up all of our food. And there are 3. There are proteins, fats, and carbs. And we can say that the energy in those foods, in that protein, fat, and carb, contribute to calories. So you may be familiar with calories. You may be familiar with plans and programs that control calories and limit calories and say how many calories you should have at certain meals. But we're going a little bit further by saying, by counting macronutrients. So by counting macros, you're inherently counting the energy or the calories in your day. But what I like to really make clear for people is that calories can control your weight, can influence weight gain and weight loss and weight maintenance. But macronutrients can influence or control body composition and athletic performance and how you feel. So it's a little bit more detailed. You can manipulate your macronutrients in your day to feel more full, or to perform differently in your workouts, or to gain or lose fat, or gain or lose muscle. Does that make sense?
Yeah, definitely. And it's funny because like I said, macros can sound so simple and then they can also get so complicated. And then there's also so many opinions about something that you would think should be fairly simple, right?
Right.
Just thinking about how so many diets out there focus on the elimination of one macronutrient. Mm-hmm. And then there's so many arguments about, is low carb better? Is high carb better? I've even seen people arguing about, maybe protein's bad to eat too much of. And so it's every single one of them has somebody out there that's either promoting it as like the miracle macronutrient or saying that we should avoid it. And so I just think it's gotten to this place where the average consumer really doesn't understand how they work in our body and how they affect our health and how to know when to manipulate them or how to manipulate them or how to do it without it turning into this like complete time suck mind, just thing that you have to focus on all the time. So, I'm glad we're talking about it because I think there's a lot of misunderstanding. And then there's also, just to go on another tangent, there's also the fact that now we're getting that anti-diet mentality that's coming into the health and wellness space. And people are saying like, any dietitian that tells you to track macros is promoting diet culture. And I'm sure you've heard that before. Mm-hmm. So now it's not just about which macro is better, which macro is worse. Now there's this argument that we shouldn't even be talking about macros. So what's your opinion about all of that? I don't want to open too big of a can of worms, but I'm curious to know what your feeling is about, this general movement to say that, even thinking about macros or tracking them is somehow disordered or creating, that diet mentality.
As a practitioner who is in a position to be able to help people, it would be completely remiss of me for someone to say, I need help with losing weight, or I want to change my body in a healthy way. Can you help me? And for me to just refuse that help because I know how to do those things as a dietitian. So that's like first and foremost kind of how I feel in a position of power in that way. My practice has been built on the fact that I want to teach people a skill of tracking macros. It is a skill. It's not a diet. It's not a program. It is a skill that you learn so that you can be in the power position to influence your body the way that you want. I think that you have every right to make your body feel, look, and perform differently in the way that you want it to. I'm not going to stand in your way of doing that. And so I want to provide you with the tools to do that. So you never have to rely on a plan or program or another professional to hack your body. Like you should be able to have that information for yourself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I just feel like, again, it's turned into this thing where even talking about macronutrients, which in and of themselves are totally neutral.
Yeah.
They exist whether we talk about them or not. And so my feeling is when we get into that place where people are advising against even thinking about macronutrients, I actually think we're putting people at, a disadvantage because there's a lot of benefit that can come from even understanding from a general perspective, whether or not somebody's really tracking them, even what you're saying before about understanding that whole protein, carbon, fat balance, that can be very beneficial to people from a health perspective and a body composition performance perspective, especially if people are athletes, because I'm sure you've had that experience with your clients where people are super active and they're not fueling appropriately because they don't understand how the food actually supplies their needs. So I'm kind of anti-diet. I don't like saying I'm anti anything, but I definitely do not agree with the whole anti-diet mentality of, don't talk about macros, don't talk about calories, because it's really just creating this negative mindset around something that is it's just a chemical, right? Like, it's just something that exists in nature and we can understand it and we can use it to our advantage appropriately. So all of that said, I just wanted to address that first because I know sometimes a lot of the people that listen to this podcast have probably at least heard of some of these ideas around, anti-diet mentality and, the thought that tracking macros could be disordered. And I just wanted to give people context for why Emily and I are talking about it in this way, because we want to take a lot of the fear and stress out of understanding this concept. And actually, I think that's a really great segue to the next question that I had for you, which is how can flexible dieting lead to food freedom or more intuitively eating for your needs?
Yeah, so I think that for the majority of the population, you didn't get a basic nutrition class in school. And if you didn't study to be a dietitian, you definitely didn't hear about food in the way that we did. So you learned about nutrition through the lens of a diet, and you, whether or not you realized it, your perception of nutrition might be warped by that. So, eating to your needs or eating to be healthy and strong looks a lot different than eating to lose weight. And unfortunately, I think that that is the experience of a lot of people, is that, for women specifically, we see these numbers like 1,200 calories and 1,500 calories pop up out of nowhere. It seems like everywhere is like, that is the limit. But unfortunately, that is not good nutrition, and that's not enough to be healthy and strong for most people. So, I think that macronutrients can help you reshape how much food is appropriate for you. Just like you said, even if you're not tracking, even if you're just kind of logging your food and comparing it to what a prescription might say for you, or what a nutritionist might say for you, you can start to learn, wow, there's some big gaps here in what I think is appropriate for me and what is actually appropriate for me.
Mm-hmm, definitely. And again, I think especially when we're talking about active women, I honestly feel like if somebody is going to be relatively active, like if they're a runner or a CrossFitter or a lifter or whatever kind of activity a woman is doing, I think having this knowledge is actually really crucial, because so much of our food choices are driven by culture and like what we think we should be eating. And, I always hear these stories about people eating, like women eating larger meals, and their coworkers like, why are you eating so much, or something like that. And it's like, there's just so many influences that are not helpful when it comes to a person fueling themselves. And so I definitely see a lot of my athletic clients struggling in their health because they don't have this understanding of how to fuel themselves appropriately and how to do that in a way that's not, again, neurotic, where it's like every single gram of anything that they bite is like, has to be exactly tracked or you're not doing it right.
One reason why I think macros does like lead to food freedom is because it strips away all of that mess. Like, it strips away the ethics and the dogma around eating and food. There's no yes and no, or goods and bads, or blocks or points, or anything like that. So if you have these voices around you, peers, whether well-intended or not, coaches, well-intended or not, like, you get to be in full control in your little bubble about how, like, you can feel confident that what you're doing with your nutrition is appropriate for you. And you can just like let all that other stuff fall away, which can be really empowering.
Mm-hmm. And I think we always need to remember that any tool can be used inappropriately, right? Yep. So just because some people use macros in a more disordered, self-harming way does not mean understanding and tracking macros in and of itself is bad. So I think that's really important to understand, because I think a lot of women just get scared to do things because they're like, well, I don't want to be disordered, or I don't want to restrict myself. And I think it's because they're coming from this mindset of, if I'm paying attention to my diet, it's because I'm restricting. Yeah. And I know that both of us, a lot of times I'm sure are actually making our clients eat more food than they were eating without paying attention. So I want people to understand that, because again, I feel like there's so much misunderstanding. There's so much vitriol online right now about, anyone who talks about macros is unethical. And I don't know how much of that you see. I've started unfollowing people that say that kind of stuff, but I've seen it. And so that I know that message is out there, and I want to use this opportunity to really help people understand that the tool is not the problem. It's how you use the tool that is going to either create great results or problematic results. So what are some reasons that a woman might want to consider using macro tracking as a positive tool?
So like we said before, I think it puts you in the driver's seat of how you want to look, feel, and perform. And you can use this approach to do any number of goals. It is not inherently a weight loss related method. And that's where I think that shift in your mind needs to be made, is that if you've only learned about nutrition, if you only pay attention to your nutrition and what you're eating when you're trying to attempt to be smaller, this will be a shift for you. And that's a good thing. Use the tool to do something different. So my clients are using it for they're using it for weight loss if they want to. They're using it for weight gain if they want to, fat loss, lean muscle gain, or improving their athletic performance. I also have clients that are really concerned about their blood sugar or about their adrenal issues. And by eating enough or eating differently or a different mix of macros, we can absolutely control markers like that as well.
Mm-hmm. And I feel like, the caveat is that if somebody has an eating disorder history or current eating disorder, obviously we don't want to be suggesting that they should be doing this or, should be doing it alone by any means. But there is a lot of opportunity for people who have dealt with even disordered eating, not like a true eating disorder where there's a diagnosis or anything like that, but just that I just think there's so much like subtle disordered eating in women, especially in our country, but I'm sure around the world in general, where it's like they're always thinking about eating less. They're always thinking about what can I cut, or, how can I avoid carbs or something. And so I actually think that appropriate and professionally supported macro tracking can be a great way for someone who has mild disordered thinking around food to really transform that, to then start approaching food from a more healthy and self-caring type of mindset. Do you agree with that?
Absolutely. So yeah, like we said, it's you're stripping away yes and no's and goods and bads. So no longer is a Pop-Tart worth more or less than like a sweet potato. Like on paper and to your body, they provide different micronutrients, but you can really break up with some of that negative eating behavior and demonizing around foods with a macro tracking approach. And this is certainly not a like call for, you will find out very quickly if you're tracking macros that you cannot fit pizza and Pop-Tarts and ice cream and all this stuff into your diet 100% of the time. But the fact that you can make friends with those foods and work them in when you want to is really powerful for a lot of people.
Yeah, definitely. So, obviously you work with a lot of women, and you probably even just interact with a lot of women that are thinking about macros, tracking macros, that kind of thing. So what are some of the biggest mistakes that you see women making when it comes to tracking macros?
I think by and large, the number one mistake women make is that they think they need to be perfect with the method to make it work for them. And just like I would liken it to any skill that you're learning, if you're learning how to ride a bike, or if you're learning how to walk on your hands, if you're learning how to lift weights for the first time, you're not going to be great at it in the beginning. But even in your efforts to be better at it, you're going to see progress. And even if that progress is just mental shifts, that's progress in and of itself. So I always encourage my new clients, if they're brand new to macro tracking, I'll say, here are your macros. This is what we're going for. I'm not going to touch them for several weeks, but you're not going to hit them tomorrow. You're not going to hit them next week, and you're probably not going to hit them in 2 weeks. The goal is for you to just edge yourself better, get yourself closer, inform your choices for the next day, just try to challenge yourself to be a little bit better every single day. And that's kind of how I handle it.
And what might be a sign that somebody is struggling with perfectionism around macro tracking?
They are obsessed with hitting the numbers right on the nose. If they're over, they feel like a failure. If they're under, they feel like a failure. If they're in an environment where they didn't control their food, they don't know what's in the dish, whether that's at a restaurant or a friend's house or a social event, something like that, they will not track it at all. They'll say they'll just start over tomorrow. They'll eat whatever they want, because they can't track it. So these are all things we work on in coaching, but certainly in my course as well, is we're trying to teach people how to eyeball their food. And that's a skill that you need, whether or not you're tracking your macros or not. You want to be able to feed your body, nourish your body in a healthy and appropriate way, no matter what situation you find yourself in when it comes to food.
Mm-hmm. So it's kind of that all or nothing. Either, you panic if it's not perfect, or you just throw it all out the window because you're like, well, I know I can't be perfect, so why even bother?
Yeah, I think that is left over from diet plans and programs because there are rules to follow. And in macros, there's not a lot of rules. So it can feel really uncomfortable for people when you tell them that you can be in the gray, and even in the gray, there's progress there.
Awesome. So what are some of the common myths that women believe that prevent them from experimenting with macro tracking in the first place?
There are a few, but I'd say there are three main ones. The first one being that you have to eat the same way every single day to make it work. The second one being that it's really complicated and time consuming. I love being able to bust that myth for people. And then lastly is just kind of like if it works, or it works for you, but it's definitely not going to work for me kind of mentality. So they're not even going to try it because they just don't believe they'll be successful. So for those women specifically, I like to say, that that's a reframe. That's like, this is a tool to help you learn how much you need to eat to support your body, not a weight loss mechanism. So like, if we can just shift that, if we can just move away from the end goal being the only reason why you want to track macros, a lot of times that can remove this pressure that it's not going to work for me. Like, you just got to open your eyes to all the other benefits that it could possibly bring to your life instead of just scale weight being the measure.
So is that when you say that women are worried it won't work for them, is it because work in quotes is losing weight?
I think so. Yep.
I feel like that's such a common thing for any dietary changes. Do you see that a lot where it's like people make these changes and they get all these health benefits, but because the scale didn't change, they feel like it didn't work?
Absolutely. And I tell people in my very first call with them, in my one-on-one coaching, here are 7 things that we're actually going to look at to see if you're making progress. And if you come to me and say, I'm frustrated because I'm not making progress because the scale didn't go down, I'm going to gently remind you of all these other things that we can measure progress and success by. And that makes them feel a lot better because the lens is opened up much more wide for them to, see improvements in.
What are some examples of things that you might look at instead of weight to track progress?
So for somebody that is interested in changing their body shape and size, we will look at progress pictures. We will look at body measurements. For in general, I'd say that health, like some habits and behaviors that we would like to see change are this all or nothing mentality, not being able to trust yourself around food. If we can say we're making a big dent in that in your life, that is a huge success. If you feel confident whenever you go to different social situations or you find yourself not in control of the food, but know what to eat, stop when you're 80% full. Like if you're checking those boxes and feeling really good about that, that is a success. So that falls under the bucket, I guess I should say, the habits and behaviors buckets. Another bucket might be symptoms in general. So like blemishes and acne or digestive symptoms, aches and pains, headaches, low energy. If we see some of those things dramatically improve as a result of eating enough or eating appropriate amounts of food for you and the right macronutrient balance, it's going to be a huge success for us.
And with those, you said 7, do you customize those to the person, or is it like there's 7 that everybody's looking at and they just get to like see which ones are improving?
Yeah, no, I say there's 7 buckets. And then when we're going over someone's plan, I'm going to say what I expect to see change in you based on your health assessment are these. So for one woman, it might be an all or nothing mindset. And for another woman, it might be, they're using food to cope. So, it might be different. It's different depending on the client. But I like to name them for people so they can be like, oh, wow, like I'm excited to use numbers and macros to like achieve all these other goals too.
Yeah. And it's funny because when I work with clients, we do a goal setting activity. Like the first thing we do on our initial call is come up with their top 3 objective health goals. And it's always interesting to like, some people know exactly what they want and it's super easy to get to that number, which 3 is not that much. I mean, I feel like most of us can at least figure out 3 different things we might want to track when it comes to our health. But I think when it comes to making them measurable and making them objective, that's where people tend to struggle because, I'm sure you've seen this too, where people come to you and they're like, I just want to feel healthy. And it's like, well, what does feel healthy mean? And unfortunately, what happens if people don't get clear about that, then they default to something like the scale weight because it is measurable, right? So it's like,
Totally.
well, I want to be healthy. What does healthy mean? I don't know, that the number on the scale is this number because that's arbitrarily what I've decided is a healthy weight. And then they start to fixate on that because it's like, well, that's the only thing I can track. So I'm going to just make that the thing that I pay attention to. Whereas something like feeling confident in your food choices, not the most easy thing to be objective about, but you can put numbers to that kind of stuff. And you can, subjectively track some of those with numbers and everything. So I really like the concept of diversifying metrics in general when somebody is tracking progress, whether it's, even with the business coaching that I do, a lot of times it's like easy to say, I just want to make more money or focus on the dollars that somebody is earning every month. But, there's things like how many hours are you working? Do you like the clients? Like, do you enjoy working with the people you're working with? Do you, feel like you have the flexibility to take a day off? Like what kind of things really matter to you? Because at the end of the day, money is important for a business. You can't run a business without earning money. But most of us, when we say we want more money, it's really like, we just want more freedom, or we want more enjoyment, or we want more flexibility, that kind of thing. So I think the same thing applies to health, where it's like, yes, you can track your scale weight. That's not necessarily something that's bad to do, but what does that movement on the scale mean to your day-to-day life? Because I think for so many women, it's like, well, what happens if you hit that goal weight? Like what changes? Anything? Maybe not. Maybe there are some good changes. Like if you're at that higher body size and you have a lot of joint pain, losing 10% of your body weight could make a huge impact on joint pain. Does that mean you get to your ideal scale weight that you think is appropriate or you think is healthy? Maybe not. But if your joint pain goes away, that's actually a really awesome thing. So I'm glad to hear that you're helping women understand the diversity of things that they can pay attention to with progress, because I feel like if they're not looking at all that stuff, then the number on the scale is driving their feelings of success and their feelings of accomplishment. And that doesn't always tell even part of the picture, let alone the full picture.
Yeah. Especially if you are strength training, as you and I both know, like the athletic women that we sometimes work with, like scale weight is going to be like the least interesting metric we look at in our entire time together.
Yeah, definitely. So now a little bit ago, we mentioned that there were some instances where somebody might not be appropriate for macros and tracking macros, that kind of thing. Do you have some guidelines for people if they're thinking about trying this? Is there anyone that you feel like should maybe pump the brakes a little on it?
Yeah, I think people who tend to feel triggered by weighing and measuring their food, or even looking at numbers in general, they just can't seem to let it go if they aren't on the nose, or if they've had experiences in the past where they've had to be in charge of that and it's not gone well. So I will ask people to be a little bit self-informed, and, I field for this, or try to on my application form and my discovery calls, if you feel triggered by this, it probably wouldn't be a great method for you. People who are maybe working through disordered eating actively, like they're working with a professional to heal their relationship with food and their body image, I would like them to either work alone with that practitioner and get that under control in their own way before working with me. Very rarely will I work in conjunction with somebody that's doing that at the same time, because sometimes I think that our methodologies can bump heads, and I'd rather you just have your care team around nutrition and health and body image and all that stuff in a silo, and really, really put your efforts toward that before we start talking about, changing your body shape and size through macros.
Mm-hmm. And is there anything other than disordered mindset around food that could be an indicator that macros would be not a great fit to focus on?
I think if you are, I guess I've quote unquote talked people out of working with me if they have significant digestive issues, or if they have significant, I'm thinking like skin issues, or something that is really more related to the quality of your food and really figuring out like what foods work for your body and what foods don't. I really need you to work on that first before we talk about quantity. That is high priority number one. So I'd say like working with a specialist around your digestive health, if you're having those problems, certainly we can do a number of things together. And I am a dietitian, so like I can touch on those subjects, but I would say there are definitely more qualified experts in my field as a registered dietitian that can help you when you have a ton of digestive issues going on, or eczema, or might be, heart issues, diabetes, and things like that.
Yeah. Yeah. I feel like in those cases, it's not that macros would be bad. It's more just not the priority.
Yeah, that's what
And so it's like, you could talk about macros and maybe there could be some benefit from that, but it's probably not going to be as helpful or effective with all that other stuff going on. So it's almost more of like a order of priority, like get that fixed first. And then when you're feeling better, then you can start to be a little bit more focused on macro tracking and learning that skill. That definitely makes sense, especially with, there's so many health conditions out there that do get very influenced by food quality. And I think that's the thing that, if I was going to think of a myth that I think is really common, is this myth that macro tracking makes you eat junk if you don't want to eat junk, like you have to eat donuts if you're macro tracking, that kind of thing. And having more of that functional, holistic approach that I take with my clients, and not that I don't talk about macros, but it's definitely not like my main focus the way it is for you. It's something where like I talk about macros when it comes to just general templates and understanding protein, carbs, and fat, and like making sure they are nourishing themselves, since it's a little scary because a lot of digestive issues can at least be worsened by malnutrition. And so if somebody's chronically dieting, that actually can create digestive disorder. So even though, yes, you need to focus on healing the gut issue, I think sometimes macros can actually really be a great complement to that, because it's like, and you need to eat enough. You need to not be, eating kale and chicken breast if you want to have good digestion. So what I was going to say is that, yeah, I agree that the health stuff is the priority, and somebody who has a severe digestive issue probably needs to be a little bit more careful about food quality and specific choices, and understanding how foods affect their body more so than the average person. And I also strongly believe that understanding macros and understanding caloric needs can benefit a lot of people in some of those conditions as well. So that's just my perspective as someone who works more with like, the health challenges and solving those. If somebody's not eating enough, or, super strict on like they're keto and they really would benefit from more carbs, or if they're just not getting enough protein and their blood sugar's all over the place, that stuff does make a huge impact on their healing as well. So it's not like
it can work in conjunction. Yeah. They absolutely can work in conjunction. But yeah, you're asking me like who should not experiment with it. It's like, if you have a bigger need here, like a health need, tackle that first.
Yeah. And, maybe tackle it together. Honestly, I think sometimes, I mean, I don't want people to get overwhelmed. And like we were saying before with coaching and psychology and stuff, you don't want to give somebody like 100 things to do. But I also think sometimes it is something that I see in people that come to me that have worked with, not usually dietitians. Usually they've worked with like a functional medicine doctor or something like that. And they get put on these like super restrictive diets. It's like, oh, go do the autoimmune protocol, which I have nothing against like a elimination diet like that, but nobody talks to them about calories. Nobody talks to them about carbs and protein and fat and like making sure that they're getting enough of those. And so they go on these quote unquote healing diets, which maybe have some benefit to them, but then they end up creating new problems or exacerbating problems that they have because they are malnourished. And that's where I think having that macro understanding, even at like a baseline level, maybe it's not time to like go learn how to do all the tracking stuff, but even what you were saying before about that, like PFC understanding, I actually think would be super valuable for most people who are also working through more of like a healing diet. So, I just want people to make sure that if they're not working with a dietitian, that they at least have this on their radar, just because it's so often a problem in the functional medicine world that I honestly don't think gets talked about enough. And, anyone that talks about macros and can help educate on that, I'm like, please be aware of this. Like, this is actually a big deal. So
yeah. No, you're right. When you're limited to 10 foods or less, like you're not getting the biodiversity that you need. And it really, really impacts your gut health and your digestion and overall how you feel, nutrient status. It impacts everything.
So if somebody's listening to this and they're like, you know what, I think I want to learn more about how to use macros, how to understand them, how to incorporate this knowledge into my approach to health, where would you suggest that they start?
I would say start with emilyfieldrd.com/blog. I have several resources, free resources on my website that will get you from, I have no idea what macros are to, okay, let's start tracking. And so everything in between. So I would start with my blog. I would also start with following me on social media because I'm using, every day you can see me on stories talking about something macro related. So you're going to capture a lot of free information that way on my Instagram. So Emily Field RD. I think lastly, Google gets you far, but you got to get, I feel like focusing on one or two practitioners that are doing it really well. And hopefully my message resonated well with your listeners. I think it's important to narrow how much input we get from in the health space. Sometimes we can just get so inundated with people that are doing things at this slant and that opinion and whatever. And that can be super overwhelming. So you don't actually take any action. And my whole goal for you is to take action and start, helping yourself. That was where my practice totally started. So I would say find two great practitioners, or maybe tops three that you're really focusing on and really listening to their message because it resonates with you, and try on their techniques and try on their resources and see if they work for you, and then go from there. But yeah, like you said, we're muting people that don't work for us. Like we do it too. Like we want to stay in the lane of the people that make us feel great, make us feel like we can take small actionable steps and leave the rest.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I totally agree with that. I think one of the main things I always focus on when I'm working with clients is the least amount somebody can do to get the most amount of results. And I feel like because I'm in that functional medicine space, so many of the people that come to me from and I'm not trying to throw anybody under the bus. Like I'm not, there's no specific people that I'm thinking of other than just they'll go to like a functional medicine doctor and come home with like a 10-page packet of all the foods they need to avoid. And there's like no guidelines about how much to eat or like how to, actually shop for any of this stuff. So my perspective is always, let's just get the basics covered before we start getting all sorts of complexity in. And, sometimes I think people think it's like, well, there's got to be more I can do. I need to do more. I need to do more, take more foods out or, do more exercise or whatever it is. And I just, I really agree with you that keeping things as simple as possible. And sometimes that means kind of like you said, cutting out some of the noise that you might be getting. That doesn't mean other people have incorrect or bad information. It's just information overload is rampant these days. So if there's a couple of people out there that you like to get your information from, don't be afraid to explore, but also just be careful about, having lots of different influences that are saying completely opposite things. And then you're not sure what to do. And then it's like, you're either doing nothing or you're trying to do everything. And usually that doesn't work for anybody. So this is a question that I usually ask pretty much everyone that comes on the show, because one of my goals with the show is to help just inspire women in general to do what they feel is their purpose. And I think it's really cool to have women on the show who are living their lives, doing a job, like, stepping out and pursuing something that takes a lot of courage and takes a lot of commitment and consistency, and dealing with, I'm sure you deal with a lot of stuff online that maybe is a little unpleasant or, is not necessarily sunshine and rainbows all the time. So I just think it's awesome to have the opportunity to bring women on the show that are really stepping out and pursuing what they find valuable and serving the world using their skills. So out of curiosity, what is your big vision for the work that you're doing in your business and the impact that you hope to have on the world through the work that you do?
I think the big vision is I don't want you to have to hire a nutritionist or be a nutritionist to understand how your body works. And so if people have a basic understanding of which foods contain which macros and they know how to eat to make themselves feel better, instead of resorting to a plan or a program that has strict rules and complicated strategies, it just makes for more confidence in yourself and empowers yourself. And that's what I want to see for people. I oftentimes liken it to a car. Like you don't have to read the manual to drive the car, but it sure helps to have one if something breaks and the lights go off and like it's all dinging at you. And how empowering would it feel that if you knew what was wrong with your car and you could fix it yourself instead of going to somebody else to help get that fixed. And the same thing is for your body. You don't have to have a manual on nutrition to feed yourself. But if you want to change something about the way you feel and look and perform, it's incredibly empowering to be able to make those small adjustments to your diet and feel better. And I think my way of doing that is teaching people macronutrients.
Mm-hmm. I love the car example. It reminds me of this is kind of totally off topic, but I was at a car dealer getting my car serviced. And then he came over and told me like, oh, we should really be doing all of these things with this checkup. And here's all the stuff that I recommend. I don't know anything about cars. So I was like, okay, sounds good. Go ahead. I'll sit here for another hour and just let you do it. And when I got home and my husband like saw the receipt, he was like, I thought you were just getting an oil change. I'm like, well, they said I was due for all this stuff. So they just did it. And I was like, and it was funny because he was like, well, first of all, I could have done probably most of that. Second of all, none of that was necessary. Like you did not need all of these things. And I was like, I didn't know. I don't know anything about cars. Like he just told me it was something that they recommended. So I think it's a great, and to be fair, I was like not that upset about it, but I probably spent an extra, $100 or $200 that wasn't necessary to be spent because I didn't know what was going on. So I totally love that analogy because it's like, yeah, like you could go to a dietitian every single time you have a problem with your food or you don't understand something. And that's an option, but who wants to live in a situation where anytime your dietary needs change, you have to go talk to somebody and, hope like pay them for their time or even just, take that time out of your schedule to go meet with someone. So I definitely agree that even the baseline understanding is so valuable. And it doesn't mean you have to have a degree in dietetics or, you don't have to have done multiple classes of biochemistry to understand it. But, I think there's basic information that most people are capable of understanding that would be valuable. So one more question that I always ask everybody, and this one sometimes, not that I want to put this on you, but sometimes it throws people off. So take your time if you need it. But the question is, what do you believe makes a person more than a body?
I just feel like everything. We are not our bodies. It is just our way to be on this earth, truly. So your thoughts and dreams and aspirations, I think, are huge in that. I don't know. I don't have like a philosophical answer. I just would feel like your soul and your energy make you you. And that is totally transcendent of your body and where you're housed.
I love it. Well, like I said, you're not alone when people are like, oh my gosh, that was a little out of left field. But I just like to get a variety of opinions on that because at the end of the day, my goal with this podcast is for women to understand tools and techniques and strategies and, just ways that we can care for our bodies really well without it turning into something that is obsessive or controlling our thoughts or, the only thing that we think about. So it's always nice to hear that pretty much all the nutritionists and dietitians and health coaches and fitness coaches and everyone that I bring on the show does truly believe that, yeah, your body's worth taking care of, but it's not the end all be all. And, I would hope that anyone working with any provider is looking for someone who knows that, you're not just your body. So all of that said, you had mentioned some resources that you have, but I just want to make sure that everybody knows where to find you if they want to learn more, if they want to follow along. So where can people get in touch with you if they want to connect with you further?
So Emily Field RD on Instagram would be my preferred place. I love Instagram. I'm there every day. EmilyFieldRD.com for all of my free resources and guides and tools for how to start tracking your macros. I'd say if you are like ready to go, like you really want to give macro tracking a try, you can go to EmilyFieldRD.com/DIY guide. And that is going to be your place to download a free guide to help you figure out what your macros should be to support your body. It's not an inherent weight loss program or plan or prescription. You can do with it whatever you want, and the guide really spells that out for you.
Awesome. Well, we'll make sure to link to all of that in the show notes so people can check that out. And I just want to say thank you, Emily, for coming on the show and sharing your wisdom and getting to chat a little bit about a topic that, again, can be controversial, but doesn't need to be. And I think just helping to empower women to use it as a tool as it's intended to be used, and to actually have the opportunity to have macros enhance their well-being rather than be afraid of it or feel like, it'll never work for them.
Mm-hmm, absolutely. Well, thanks so much for having me, Laura.
Yeah, well, thank everybody for hanging out with us for the last hour or so, and we will see you here next week on the Fed and Fearless podcast. Take care, everybody. Hey there, Laura Schoenfeld here again. Are you a dietitian or nutrition entrepreneur who wants to start or grow an online business? Are you feeling stuck, frustrated, or even downright scared when you think about taking the next step towards your dreams of entrepreneurship? Trust me when I say that I've been there before. I've been running my own online business since 2014, and I worked with Chris Kresser to help him grow his business starting in 2012. And over the past 8+ years, I've learned a lot and made a lot of mistakes when it came to creating the multiple six-figure business I now run today. And if there's one thing I've learned since starting my business, it's this. You don't have to figure out how to transform your knowledge, expertise, and passion into profitable online courses, digital products, and memberships on your own. I've personally invested over $100,000 in my own business education, mentorship, and coaching. And I can honestly say that I have no idea where my business would be today had I not taken the leap to invest in myself and in my success. I might not be running a business where I get to work with amazing clients every day, helping them solve their biggest health and business challenges so they can live the purpose-driven life they were put on this earth for. Remember, becoming an in-demand expert in your business isn't about being egotistical or selfish. It's about having a deep commitment and a burning desire to help others. And if you're not growing your business successfully, there are hundreds and maybe even thousands of people out there who are missing out on the opportunity to get the amazing help and support that you were born to provide. You're here for a purpose, and if helping people improve their health by running an online business is one of your purposes, then I have an exciting opportunity that'll help you build your business even faster and easier than ever before. My world-class business coach, James Wedmore, is releasing an awesome video series for entrepreneurs called The Rise of the Digital CEO. In this series, James shows you exactly what keeps most business owners stuck and struggling, and reveals the 5 areas you need to focus on to overcome whatever is standing in the way of your success. Now, if you don't know James Wedmore, he's a self-proclaimed serial entrepreneur who's built multiple 7-figure businesses in multiple niches. He's also one of my favorite coaches and mentors, and he's helped me completely transform my mindset around business so I could grow my income and impact while also working less and enjoying life more. The financial and time freedom I've experienced has been life-changing, and I want you to have that experience in your business as well. This is your chance to tap into a series of instructional videos that'll show you exactly what you need to blast through whatever's got you stuck and give you the power and confidence to take on the world of online business. And best of all, this video series is totally free. So if you're ready to start taking charge of your business and your life, go to fedandfearless.com/rise to watch these videos before they go away. While you're there, you can also get on the wait list to learn more about James's amazing online program, Business by Design, which helps struggling service-based coaches and course creators transform their businesses from the inside out so that they can experience the time and financial freedom they desire while having a bigger impact on the world. And if you decide to join BBD under me using one of my links, you'll also receive bonus coaching from me. You'll learn additional tools and strategies that are specific to nutrition and dietitian entrepreneurs who want to start, grow, or scale their business to 6 figures and beyond. I'll be teaching you things like effective sales call strategies, how to stand out online in a crowded market, and how to develop your first or next online nutrition program, and more. If you want to learn more and watch James' free video series, The Rise of the Digital CEO, go to fedandfearless.com/rise. This video series is only available until Thursday, June 25th. So don't miss your chance to learn the business strategies that have changed my life and the lives of thousands of online entrepreneurs. And feel free to DM me on Instagram if you want to find out more about my bonus business coaching opportunities for anyone who joins Business by Design under me. It's time to rise in your online business, and I can't wait to support you on your journey to becoming the confident digital CEO you desire to be.